Step 1.
Using a 3 extra long hook, we're going to attach our tying thread about 1/3 back from the hook eye. This once again will help us ensure that our body proportions are accurate. Cover the hook shank up. And on this particular fly, we want to make sure that there's no parts of the hook showing on those basic thread wrap all the way back. We need a good thread foundation on this fly.
Step 2.
For the body on this fly, we're going to use a pre-made foam body. This particular one happens to be 7/8 plump. We're going to take a straight edge or an X-Acto blade, and we're going to make an incision on the body on the underside from the widest point forward to the blunt front end.
So it's not actually cut all the way to the back.
No, the foam body on this fly actually overhangs the back of the fly.
I see.
So we may have to make a couple of incisions, and obviously you got to be careful not to cut yourself.
Or all the way through, I guess.
Yeah. You can see the incision there that the hook shank's going to fit into.
Step 3.
With the body prepared, we're going to take a light green marker. I believe this color is grass green, and we're just going to cover the underside of it. This just suggests the light underbelly of the natural nymphs.
Why are you coloring it now and not at the end?
It's just easier to do.
Step 4.
I'm going to cover those thread wraps with a light coating of super glue or aqua seal. Any adhesive will work for this. And we're just going to open the incision and place the foam body onto and around the hook shank. Squeeze it into place. Can be a little tricky sometimes. There we go.
Step 5.
Grasping the body to keep it in position, I'm going to take some thread wraps. Start with a looser wrap and get progressively tighter. Kind of tight, tighter, tightest philosophy with your thread. You don't have to make the first wrap the tightest. Things will stay controlled and in place.
Do you do that after the glue is dried or while it's drying?
Well, we use super glue for this, so it dries pretty quickly. But you could certainly pre-make a lot of these.
Step 6.
With the body in place, we're now going to color it. It's easier to do at this point because we don't have any of the other parts of the fly in the way. This particular dragonfly nymph suggests the sprawling nymphs of the family Libellulidae, often called to many anglers gomphus, but they're actually not. Gomphus are a type of dragonfly, a species of dragonfly that lives in slow-moving rivers and streams. These are actually very common inhabitants of Kara weed beds, places like that, in many instances more so than the darners. We've added varying colors here, and again the color scheme should match the natural nymphs in the bodies of water you fish. And we're just, once the colors are in place, we're smearing them.
Step 7.
For the legs, we're going to use some hen pheasant fibers. It's an alternative material to traditional cock pheasant. I prefer it for my dragonfly nymphs because of its natural mottled appearance, and it's a little softer and easier material to work with, more easily to manipulate and control. We're just going to bind that in place along the far side of the hook, adjust it for length. We want those legs so the tips stick back about even with the rear of the body. And then place additional securing wraps once we're happy with its position.
I'm looking at the feather fibers sticking straight out. Is that normal, or do they bend back when you start to retrieve it?
They will sweep back when you retrieve.
Step 8.
We're going to add another set of legs on the near side of the hook using the same material. About 6 to 8 strands of hen pheasant fibers will be fine. I'm going to stroke them together, place them against the hook shank at an approximate length. Use 2 or 3 wraps to get them in place, Then rotate the fly and pull them to length. This makes it a little easier to get the right length so that they match the other side. And it also tends to sweep them back along the body. Once we're happy with the position, we place additional securing wraps and trim away the excess hen pheasant fibers. Get a very nice mottled look here.
Step 9.
Just going to cover the front portion of the hook shank with thread, again to create a good base to bind our materials on. For the eyes, we're going to use about a 1-inch section of small float foam and figure eight them in place, half the distance between the body and the hook eye, positioned centrally. Using our thumb and forefingers, we're just going to position the eyes and then weave our thread in and around, figure eighting them into place. I'm going to bind them in good and tight. They shouldn't move when they're done.
Step 10.
We're going to form a small dubbing loop. Wind that up into position, right up against the body to tighten the loop up. And insert our dubbing tool and grab some mohair blend dubbing, open the loop at the base, and slide it up into position.
When's a good time to fish this fly?
Dragonflies are what we call a stillwater staple and can be fished year-round. They migrate toward shore to crawl out and emerge late July and August, depending on temperature and elevation. Great to search over weed beds. This buoyant pattern allows you to hover it over cara beds and other such areas that are actually kind of hard on the fly box, often hanging up and frustrating the angler because they spend more time unfouling their hook, whereas this fly bobs and holds above the weed bottom. What we do is use a full sinking fly line of type 4 or greater density. 5 or 6s are even common, and anywhere from a 3 to 6 foot leader, and the weight of the fly line drags the fly down to the bottom, and then using a short hand twist or strip retrieve, we're just going to pull this fly over the weed tops. It's also a good pattern to use in the early morning on many of the clear marl and cara lakes. Trout will often come into the margins under the security of low light and feed. It's quite visible, the angler can see it, and it's a very exciting way to fish. You can see the trout coming, a couple of strips to draw attention to your fly, and the hardest part of that whole presentation is just letting it sit, because the trout have certainly seen it.
Step 11.
With the head complete, we're just going to whip finish the fly and do some final trimming.
We didn't really talk too much about the making of the head on the last step because we were talking about fishing. Is there anything we should recap on?
It's standard of what we've done on a lot of the other flies, just placing the material into the loop, sliding into position, and then taking that dubbing noodle and weaving it in and around the head.
Step 12.
And now for the final trimming. We're going to trim the eyes by making sure they're about as wide as the narrowest point on the body is a good reference point. We're going to take our scissors and trim and manicure the dubbing. Again, it's more the wishes of the angler, I believe, than the trout. We all like our flies to look reasonably respectable. It's probably more out of fear of a fellow angler looking in your box and laughing than impressing the fish. And now we're just going to take our legs and actually pinch the body quite firmly to train and sweep them along the fly. We don't want them too swept back. We want them to stand out so when we strip them through the water, they'll move back and forth. So just a walking nymph. The completed foam sprawler. A very buoyant pattern. We need a full sinking line to pull this down into the depths.